Haley and David forever. Haley and David forever. 2011 to forever. That's 14 years. I hope you've lasted that long. It's impressive. Haley and David park bench strangers. Park bench Haley. That's what I'm going to call you from now. Park bench David. Name's Park bench David. Concept for this one is Project 2025, but make it leftist, make it left-wing people like it now. I know I've put a challenge before myself here. So for the longest while, the narrative surrounding our nation's institutions, like, say, the Supreme Court, was that the Supreme Court is sort of an independent body. Its job is to enforce the Constitution, and we had a very, holy, sacred belief around that for the longest while. And we frame arguments when we have conversations in these constitutional terms, oftentimes for this reason, right? We're not just talking, when people talk about gun control, they're not just using the phrase Second Amendment for no reason. They're doing it because they're actually trying to make a specific constitutional, court-based sort of an argument about it. So then there was waves of politicization that happened, where conservatives started to early on dislike the Supreme Court. That was the first wave. They were talking about activist judges and activist court hosts, right? That was the idea there. And that really brought to the fore the idea that these are people. The people sitting on the Supreme Court, the people sitting in court offices as judges around the country, are human beings casting real human judgments. They're not just, sort of independent, blind, abstract institutions that neutrally interpret law. They're human beings who have biases and irrational views and so on. And then the second wave was more recently, with the series of Trump appointments in the first administration to the Supreme Court, and probably some more, maybe. People die a lot. It's funny how if you get a bunch of old people who are around the same age, they all die at the same time. Maybe that was a bad plan to begin with. A lot of Democrats have started hating the Supreme Court, and also have started thinking of it as a political institution again, because now they're thinking of a lot of these new Supreme Court appointees as highly ideological right-wingers, rather than just really experienced justices with neutral legal qualifications to discuss the Constitution. So this has led to conversations on, let's say, the populist left. That might be a good word for it. The pro-populist left, about either abolishing the Supreme Court or changing the way the Supreme Court is structured, stacking it, filling the court in the hopes of pumping it with more people. And a lot of it seems like it's either making the court a more political institution, right? Similar to Congress, where people vote on it and they elect people, and then there's this big body that's supposed to be representative of the general population, and they sort of govern and decide together. So either democratizing it, or doing away with it, or limiting its power in some way. There's various proposals. There's a lot of different proposals, but all of them boil down to a sort of populist creed that this should be more direct. This decision-making, let's admit to ourselves that these are people with political biases, and then just do it openly. Let's just openly have these conversations in political terms. right? So it's interesting to me that there's now an emergent group of people who are very pro a strong politicization of what was seen as an independent, neutral, expert-driven institution on the left, and now also strong opposition to a politicization of the federal bureaucracy, because that is where this is going. Project 2025. That's the term that's been given to it. Aside from, well, see, I think a lot of people talk about it wrong. A lot of people on the left talk about Project 2025, and they just list various conservative policy proposals that are listed within the handbook that they personally dislike or think are too extreme, for example. None of that, to me, is unique or new. None of the proposals in Project 2025 handbook, the handbook for governance released by that organization with all the different interest groups, none of that is unique or that different from, say, the Republican Party platform or Donald Trump's platform or any other different platform that is announced various conservative policy goals. So all of the posts that are like, oh, did you hear that in Project 2025 they want to ban abortion? I'm like, what? Pro-life people don't like abortion? What? Oh my God, who knew? The real sort of better way to talk about it is to talk about the strategy by which they plan on achieving those goals. And that is Section F, protection removal. They want to get rid of a protection that has many federal employees basically be independent entities that aren't viewed in partisan terms, aren't appointed by partisan elected officials, and stay on between terms. So no matter who's president, these people are part of the bureaucracy. What is this group of people has sometimes been referred to by the right as the deep state. That term has become a very conspiratorial term in some circles, but originally it wasn't that conspiratorial. It was just the idea that there are these people who stay in the government between administrations and that they have some amount of influence on how policy gets carried out. That's not that crazy on its own. It's also been termed sometimes the fourth branch of government or the administrative state. The fourth branch term is because they have such a degree of independence from the president's control that to call them members of the executive branch, some people think is wrong. So they say that we actually have four branches. We have the courts, we have Congress and our elected bodies of elected officials, and then we have the executive branch, and then we have this fourth branch of independently hired people who are hired on very technocratic expertise-based basis, and are supposedly very non-partisan. Although I think a lot of people on the right would point out that overwhelmingly they are liberal college graduates, the type of person who would make up the base of the Democratic Party. But either way, just on a basic level, I don't think the idea of politicizing a previously independent, expert-driven institution is something that people have strong principled positions on. And I kind of wish that they did a little bit more. Because there is theoretically a version of this where we say, maybe we do get rid of Section F protections. Maybe we do get rid of this idea that these people are unbiased and non-partisan. There is an idea on the left these days that everything is political, that everyone is political, and anything that says it isn't political is lying to control you. That's a popular idea on the left. So why not take that and say, well, let's play this game, but better. Let's remove Section F protections, and then when left-wing candidates are elected, they hire a very left-wing partisan staff to these executive branches. And, there's an argument to be made that this would make drastic policy changes go faster and go more smoothly, because you wouldn't have this sort of neutral, independent bureaucracy holding you back. The people hired would be part of the administration, and there's an argument to be made that it would be more democratic, because this is the person people elected. The president is the person people pay attention to. It's the person people vote for. So whether they had a right-wing administration or a left-wing administration, it would be the person that the people elected and the people they hire on, the people that they want as a part of their staff operating in their bureaucracy and in their executive branch. So I'm not saying, hey, this is definitely a good idea. I'm saying it's not definitely a bad idea. And I'm also saying that it's weird that something like abolishing the Supreme Court might be a good idea, or that abolishing the Senate might be a good idea, that those ideas are floated on the left very confidently and very assertively, with this confidence that this is a way of building a stronger, more populist democracy where these elite checks on the majority don't exist. But then, for some reason, the administrative state, that's not part of that analysis. That's not part of the conversation. I think that's a little bit contradictory and a little bit strange. So when people start talking about Project 2025, my first thought is, yeah, it's an interesting insight into the nature of how our institutions function. And their first thought is like, it's how fascism happens. And we're having a very different tone of conversation, I think.